Good evening to one and all. I welcome you all for the webinar on paradigm shift in planning, design, construction, and facility management of healthcare space post-COVID-19. We are in a state of emergency with this pandemic around. There is a need to learn from the experience of the world and to explore all possibilities of finding solutions to prepare ourselves. The impact of this pandemic on human habitation, outdoor spaces, indoor environment, air treatment, space standards, planning norms, transportation, work environments, recreational spaces, etc. are yet to be explored completely. It is certain that the new normal post-COVID-19 will be different from today. And collectively, we need to understand the potential interventions in our existing healthcare facilities, as well as strategies for upcoming facilities for the future. For our discussion today, we have some eminent experts with us. I welcome all the experts, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. Professor Anil Dewan. He is a senior professor in the Department of Architecture at the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. He has been very active in healthcare architecture and has been part of innumerable hospital design projects. He has taught not only in various architecture design studios, but also to various hospital administrators, including the ones at AIIMS, New Delhi. He has been part of many committees in the World Health Organization. He is a distinguished fellow at the Institute of Hospital Engineering. He has been recently conducted an online teachers training program in the emerging areas in hospital planning, design, construction, and facilities management. On behalf of all, I welcome you, sir. We have architect Raja Singh with us. He has worked in building performance right from his master's at NIT Trichy in energy efficient and sustainable architecture. Here, he had worked on the role played by natural ventilation in the spread of smoke and fire. His research on national ventilation now focuses on its role in airborne infection spread. He is currently a research scholar at School of Architecture, New Delhi. He has published and presented in national forums. I welcome you, sir. Then third expert, we are having architect Sandal Kapoor. He is an architect, health facility planning expert, graduated from SPA New Delhi, having experience of about 9 years in planning and designing of healthcare facilities. Presently, he runs an architectural consultancy firm based in Delhi, namely Sandal Kapoor and Associates, and working on projects like Faculty of Integrated Medicine at Agra, UP, Cancer Hospital in Prayagraj, UP, Military Hospital in Himachal Pradesh, oncology centers at various locations in North India by Omega Groups. Now I request architect Raja Singh to start his presentation.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very happy to be part of this very required and needful seminar that we are having today. You see that all of us architecture students, architecture academicians have a huge role to play today. We see doctors are doing a lot, we see police is doing a lot, we see everybody is doing a lot. So we also have a role to play, and that role is immense. As we see, after lockdown, everybody is indoor, and there are so many people in the hospitals. Hospitals are stressed, and because of that, there are new hospitals which have to come up. There are new makeshift hospitals which have to come up. So in all this, we see there is so much of architectural intervention required, so that we design hospitals, we design healthcare spaces, and we design all the other spaces which take into consideration the new normal. And the new normal is something we are going to talk about today, and it has got to do with how we deal with infection control in these spaces. So a small little disclaimer today is that everything we discuss is of academic nature, and this is not professional advice, this is not news, this is not guidelines. This is academic discussion, because no, everything we say has to be verified, proved, and medical practitioners have to vet them. Only then it is of value. But this is the research that we are doing, research we have collected, and the information that we have in the public domain that we are presenting today. So I am going to talk about natural ventilation and airborne infection control. This is of immense importance. What is the importance of this? See, I want to first quote this very important thing from 101 Things I Learned in Architectural School by Matthew Frederick. In this, he said that engineers tend to be concerned with physical things in and of themselves, whereas architects are more directly concerned with human interface and human interface and with the human interface of these things, of the humans and the physical things, the interface. We are concerned with how there is a connection between humans and things. So in this, when we look at the Council of Architecture's scope of architecture, it clearly says that ventilation design is clearly under the purview of an architect. Architect has to do ventilation design, for which he will consult engineers, and engineers are amazing in the job that they do. But because of green buildings, because of so many things, they have to balance a lot of things. So sometimes what happens, when they have to balance energy conservation, they make sure, because they treat buildings like systems, so they make sure that they make a building system which consumes the least amount of energy. Sometimes it has happened that in that process, sometimes things like fresh air intake decreases. This is in some cases which have been proved. So what they have to be contacted, and a new thing has to be found out where there is energy efficiency as well as fresh air supply. So I am going to talk about free fresh air supply through natural ventilation. Now you will say, why is that so obvious? I'm going to answer that, but before, I'm going to talk about the shift that is happening in architecture. That is, we are shifting from design based to performance based. And what is performance? Performance is the attribute of a building that expresses how well that building carries out its function. Earlier it was about form, it was utility, how people are going to moving, circulation. Now we also are concerned about things like energy efficiency, things like thermal comfort, things like daylighting, and of today's interest, indoor air quality. Indoor air quality is an important attribute of performance-based design, and it is currently, right now, across the world, whenever we talk to people, whenever we ask people, they only talk about gases. They only talk about particulate matter. What is being missed? Even we don't even have Indian standards which deal with the amount of microorganisms that have to be there in the indoor air or in the outdoor air. So there is a little gap in the area of microorganisms and how their dynamics work in the indoor air. So there is a strong relation, which I'm going to talk about today, between ventilation and how ventilation can help in reducing the spread of infection in indoor spaces. So, in this photo, there is a lady. Her name is Florence Nightingale. And in the year 1859, she published a book called Notes on Nursing, which was her seminal book, and it was, focusing not on patient care but on ventilation. She has been a nurse. She has been, a role model for all the nurses, and she published a book where she said that ventilation is more important than patient care, because she says that it's the very first canon of nursing, that is, keep the air he breathes as pure as the external air without chilling him. That means she's talking about two things: thermal comfort and fresh air supply. In the mid 19th century, it was acknowledged, at that time people were still figuring out how microorganisms work. So they say that apart from expelling the exhaled carbon dioxide, they named something called miasma. So they said unhealthy organic miasma has to be removed from the indoor spaces. That became the germ theory, and today we have gone way ahead of what we knew in 1859, and today we know a lot more, and we are currently researching more and more in this area. That means that from an indoor space, we have to have continuous fresh air supply, and air has to keep on, we have to keep on changing the air. Now people are like, whenever I talk about natural ventilation, people ask me, isn't that very obvious? We always have to give natural ventilation. We always talk about natural ventilation. Every time in a studio, when we are doing a design, we're talking about natural ventilation. We're talking about natural light. We are making sun part diagrams over our building plans. We are showing small arrows with wind directions and so many other things. But we are extensively using air conditioning systems. I want to point out a fact. In a government organization, to buy a centralized air conditioning which takes care of everything, people have to go through a bigger tender, bigger committees have to set up. So what I have seen in a lot of institutes, what people do is that they have individual, so like a person applies for a small split AC. So one staff will apply for a split AC for his room, because it is small cost. It gets easily through the gem marketplace or through the college procurement. Because it's a small amount, a small committee passes it and he gets it. Now because of this, we see a rapid trend in the increase of split air conditioner units being run in small rooms. Now what people do, retrofitting. What is air conditioner? So to save the energy and to make sure that the cooling load is not much, they will close all the windows, and then what they will do, they will simply put on the split air conditioner. What that means is they are not letting fresh air inside, because split air conditioner has no mechanism for fresh air entry. So that is something that we all need to take care. So for an architect, no, I was already mentioning, building is about human experience, the form, the utility, and he depends upon the mechanical engineers who are experts in mechanical ventilation. Mechanical engineers do a brilliant job in providing systematic solutions to heating and cooling of spaces. For them, buildings are systems which have to be optimized. This is sometimes done to make one factor score well. What I mentioned, that okay, they will produce a very good system, very good cooling system, but that might sometimes miss on the fresh air supply. So then architects have to take lead. Architects are the overall coordinators of a building project. So they take lead that, sir, okay, this is a very good system, saves energy. Tell me about the fresh air supply. Tell me about this, because we are like fighter jet pilots. What we have to do is, at the same time we are doing so many things. We have to same times we have to have proper planning. We have to have cost budget analysis. We have to have evacuation. We have to have safety. We have to have security. Now we also have to have proper ventilation. We have to have spatial arrangements, so that the new normal for this this concept is met with. So now there are three ways of doing ventilation in healthcare facilities. One is natural ventilation, the other is mechanical ventilation, and the third is hybrid ventilation. Now natural ventilation I'm going to talk about. Mechanical ventilation is use of mechanical systems, and third is hybrid ventilation, which is a mixed mode of these two, which we are going to talk about very soon. 1 second. Okay, I'll go back. 1 second. Great. So now, the WHO has provided this small little guideline. Now, what is WHO saying? WHO is saying that we have to immediately make a lot of makeshift arrangements. We have to make quarantine facilities, small testing centers, screening centers, small hospitals, small isolation zones in a lot of places, in state borders, in airports, in cargo hubs, in railway stations. So many spaces we'll have to build this. So what to do? We'll have to see the availability of resources, the cost and the needs. So this is a small little WHO prescribed system that we can use dilution ventilation and natural ventilation for staff area, triage area, waiting room, sampling room. We can also use it in the cases where there are mild and moderate cases, and they are saying use hybrid systems in critical case wards. In the waste zones, you have to use natural ventilation, and more can also be natural ventilation. This is what WHO prescribes. Now, we look at what are the current systems available. So this is a small little research that we have collected. So if you use HEPA filtration, which a lot of people are talking about, so the Indian Public Health Standards 2012 clearly mention that if they are not cleaned, they themselves become the breeding spot of microorganisms. This is what the IPHS 2012 is saying. They have a high cost, the high efficiency, they come in different gradings. So and virus is way smaller than an average bacteria. Virus is very small in size. For virus, you need to have the high efficiency HEPA filter, which increases the cost. Apart from that, the advantages are that they're easily integrated into the HVAC system, easily available, and can be efficient with many microbes. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are talking about is use of ultraviolet disinfection. Now, this is more reliable than HEPA filters. The only issue that we are dealing with ultraviolet disinfection is that there is some concern with direct usage. So if you're using it as a part of your AHU, it's fine. But sometimes people use it directly. The effect of UV light on human skin is still, a lot of research is kind of challenging that. Number two, it's a one size fit all treatment. There is research happening. I've just quoted that below. It's called Indoor Airborne Bacterial Communities are Influenced by Ventilation. There's a research happening which states that we need to have a proper microbiome, because our body is, like if there are 100 human cells, there are 13 bacteria cells in our body. So we cannot free ourselves from microbes. Microbes are in our gut. Microbes are on our skin. Microbes are everywhere. So I'm talking about bacteria. I'm not talking about virus. So what I'm saying is, if we use HEPA, we can kill a lot of microorganisms. But there are some good bacteria. And that is what this research which I mentioned below, number 8, is saying. They might not be able to come inside. And if we keep recirculating the air inside, the bacteria which are produced on the human skin and the human spit, which are related to the bacteria which causes pathogenic diseases, can be recirculated in the air, and these can cause problems. Now, this is an area where there is more research to be done, because one size fit all treatment is not good. Third is dilution ventilation, which I'm trying to talk about. This is cheap and optimum. You can just go anywhere, put a system, put a envelope, and you can have proper fenestration, which will let in ventilation, which will act as a natural way of flushing out the bacteria. Now, there are two problems which I'm going to address. One thing is the balance with thermal comfort that is required, in case of dilution ventilation, and two is air pollution challenges. So there is a research which I'm going to share as to how even that is taken care of. So what is dilution ventilation? Outside air is introduced into a building to dilute the concentration of contaminants present inside. Very simple. Now, to answer the question of doing good thermal, having good thermal comfort inside spaces which are using dilution ventilation, when we are giving a system with mechanical ventilation, we are using a set point. Set point means that all the time that area will have a particular temperature. That will lead to thermal boredom. People want to go out of spaces which are always, air conditioned. So that is one issue that we deal when we are doing spaces which are completely, mechanically ventilated. And people who are isolated for 14 days, a month, they are sitting in spaces with thermal boredom. So they need some kind of a thermal, like morning temperature, evening temperature, afternoon temperature. It should be, adaptively changed. So how do we do that when you are using dilution ventilation? This is an open invitation. Dilution ventilation is an open invitation for all you architects who want to be green architects, who want to do passive design, that this is an opportunity to use passive design to make buildings which does not require mechanical ventilation, and at the same time the bonus is that you will get buildings which reduce infection spread. How do you do good passive design? Number one, choose good orientation. Number two, do sun shade design. Number three, choosing the correct material. I'm going to talk about very simply, like we were doing this national design competition, and a lot of students came to us and said, sir, if we are putting a makeshift solution, we are not using high thermal mass material. So what do we do? So we suggested that you can use high insulation material, which we are going to show in the next slide. And then we can use, landscape architects can play a big role. They can have ventilation enhanced microclimate to give some kind of a thermal comfort to the spaces. Now, this is a small little extract from SP 41, which is the Handbook of Functional Buildings by the Bureau of Indian Standards. This book has predated some large chunk of the National Building Code, and this is something that if all architecture students read, they don't need to do specialized green building courses. So it just says that, it has compared a normal brick wall with plaster to a lot of other options that are available to architects. So just by using expanded polystyrene, with plaster and with brick in a combination, they can, change the U value enormously. So for example, for the U value for a normal brick wall is 3, they can reduce that to 0.85, and they can increase the thermal time constant from 7 hours to 52 hours. That means huge insulation, there's a leap in the insulation being provided. That means by just choosing the correct material, you can have a very good passive design for your makeshift hospitals that you're going to make. Now, to answer this question of air pollution, I'm very happy that a lot of research has happened in this, and they have come up with this thing called Nasofilters Pollution Net, which is developed by IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. It's available right now on the Indian Institute Technology website. So what is this? This is a small little mesh that you can put on your normal window, and this is going to keep the pollution out. That means it will also keep your mosquito out. It will also keep everything else that you don't require out, but the fresh air is still going to come in. So this is some kind of a solution that we can look at when we are dealing with such situations. Now, what is the way forward? The way forward is make light and ventilation a fundamental right for everybody, so that we do not have places like Dharavi. We can naturally, make sure that every citizen in this country has adequate light and ventilation. If something like this happens, then there will be automatic infection control as compared to what it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for a very good presentation. So now I would take it forward, and may I request Sandal to put on the presentation and I'll speak. So what I want to say is that there are problems at the time of COVID with the healthcare systems of a lot of countries in the world, not only in India. So what are we facing problems with? We have in India, if we classify the healthcare facilities, they are in the private sector or in the government sector. So by ownership, 80% of the healthcare in India is being done by the private sector. But in the public sector, we have the local bodies, the municipalities, the hospitals, which are of local governments. Then we have, suppose we talk about Delhi, we have the municipal authorities and municipal hospitals, the state government hospitals, and the central government hospitals. So we could classify hospitals as per their levels of care, which means the primary health care. So in Delhi, we have the clinics, which are the mohalla clinics, the polyclinics, and we have maternity homes, diagnostic centers, the primary health centers, the community health centers, and we have the secondary hospitals, the sub-district hospitals, and each of the district hospitals in India is to be converted into a medical college teaching hospital. So as per the level of care, we have apex level of care, which is AIIMS-like hospitals. A medical college teaching hospital is a secondary level of care, and primary care is like the first level of contact which we have. So we have tribal areas where we could have a clean delivery room in each and every village of India, to a sub-center which we have in a cluster of a few villages, and then we come to a primary health center. So what are the problems we are facing in COVID times? In COVID times, we are dealing with infection that is airborne. So in airborne infection, a lot is to be done with the natural ventilation of a buildings, and we have to take care of so many other things. Now we are talking about home care. We're talking about ICU facilities at home. So guidelines have to be developed. Standards have to be developed. We have to take care of technology. We have to do telemedicine. We have to do remote monitoring and ensure that there is minimum contact or touch. So people in the private sector are saying that we will need more space, we will need more waiting areas. So we want incentives in the building bylaws in terms of the patient waiting areas should not be counted in the FAR, should not be counted in the ground coverage. Like we have, suppose if we give an example of Apollo Hospital in Delhi, there are 2 building blocks and there's open area which they cover with a fiberglass sheet, and that atrium kind of a space is not counted in FAR, not counted in ground area, but it is used for waiting space for the patients. So the patient waiting areas have to be large because of social distancing. So these new terms post-COVID and pre-COVID era is social distancing, touchless, and you have app-based. You can maybe the OPD is coming out of the hospital. So these are the changes which are coming. So a lot of research is to come, and we have to come out of our silos, and we have to work with so many other professionals, the users, the facility managers, and the planners, designers, engineers. They've all to work together. So in the next slide, what I'm going to explain is the various forms which we have with the healthcare spaces. So we could have a street pattern and plug-on facilities. These are very easy to add. They're modular kind of designs, and traditionally hospital development started with this. And then we have a low-rise courtyard kind of designs, which again could expand as per the various requirements. Then we have a monoblock kind of a system wherein there are courtyards which will give light and ventilation from outside and from inside, and we have corridors and rooms all around. Then we come to the American or the European kind of systems where we have a large podium and a tower. The problem with such systems in our country is we are a low resource, low income economy. In our kind of situations, it is preferred to have a ramp all the way up to the patient floors, because we have to work in for situations where we have to give patient safety, fire and life safety for people in situations where there is no electricity, where there are systems which may not work in critical situations. We come to situations where there are multiple disasters. We have the pandemic, the COVID disease inside, the earthquakes outside, the cyclones outside, the tornadoes, and all the other disasters which may happen. So we have to be resilient at all the times for taking care of these multiple problems which we could be encountering. Then there is a big shortage of healthcare manpower, which we have. So what we want to do is that we want to ensure that our healthcare facilities are working all the time. They're working when they are needed. So in the next slides, what I am going to show to you is that what are the changes which are happening to the healthcare facilities in the COVID times. So what is happening is that there are these triage areas which are coming up in outside the emergency areas. The OPD areas or outpatient departments are sometimes going out of the hospitals because it is not very safe to be in healthcare settings in these days. So there are beds being reserved for COVID patients. There are areas which are reserved for COVID patients, and there are hospitals or healthcare institutions which are specifically for the COVID patients. So in the World War time, this triaging system was developed. It's a management tool wherein with limited resources, you take care of maximum number of people. So if we have a black color, which means the person is no more and there's no need to take care of. And if it is a yellow color, so you could tag the patients, you could put the yellow, green or black tag, and accordingly the service providers would go and take care of maximum number of patients to have better health outcomes. So in the next slide, we're going to show you that what are the modular approaches. When this semester started with us in January, we had people who had come from China and they were talking about in 10 days, 1,000-bed hospital has come up in Wuhan. So these were modular kinds of units which were assembled from the factories, and very quick foundations were done on site and prefabricated, pre-engineered buildings were put up. So these are modular units which expand with the spine in the middle and plug on units on all the sides. So such facilities, we are told, in China at this moment are redundant because there are no use for them now. There are no more COVID patients. But how much are these stories true? We have yet to verify. So in the next one, what we are talking is, so what we are talking in Delhi or in India today is convert these hotels into hospital rooms. But the airflow patterns in these rooms are not correct. We have to put in an exhaust fan to these rooms and let the air exhaust out of these rooms into the open areas, because normally the hotel rooms are designed to let the air out into the corridors, which in case of infectious diseases hospitals does not work. We have, so when we convert hotels into hospital rooms, we have to modify the air conditioning systems. So here we are telling you the negative, negative, negative. So the toilet is negative, negative, which means the air from the corridor gets into the empty room, wherein we change into the personal protective gear, and then we come into the room. So the room is in the negative pressure and the toilet is minus minus. So there is no air from the toilet which can come into the room, and no air of the room can come into the empty room and into the corridor. So the airflow pattern has to be correct, and this is very important. So now the indoor air quality, the sensors, the natural ventilation, the airborne infection control and passive design strategies have been explained by Raja Singh, and we may take certain questions on these issues after this presentation. So if you have any questions, you can please ask them in the chat box and we'll answer them. So in the next slide, what I'm going to explain is that what is the shift. So now one thing good which is happening is that the lessons from healthcare design are coming into the design of malls, shopping centers, community spacing, teaching learning spaces and all public areas. So they want everything touchless. Now if you want to take a flight from Delhi to Bangalore and Bangalore to back to Delhi, we have to print a ticket at home, at airport, there's no touching, nothing. So the systems are changing all over the place. So there is social distancing and all those things have to be taken care of. So we are showing you the signages, the graphics and the detailing which is done. So the doors are no touch, and in a cafeteria or a eating shop, so there are disinfectants all over the place which are foot operated, so you don't touch it because there are lesser number of surfaces. So in a hotel room there were too many surfaces which could have infection. So we want washing hands, we want putting up a mask, we want no touching of eyes, nose and mouth. So these are the protocols which people are now understanding very well and they are following. So if we follow all these procedures and protocols, we may get into the public areas and we may go to day-to-day economic activities also, because we can't be in a lockdown kind of a situation indefinitely. So life has to go on with the COVID. So in the next slides, I'm going to show you how this minimum contact approach of sanitized entry points, screening of taking temperatures, and integration of technologies and AI enabled automatic foot operated fittings and knobs and all these things. So we have the machines, the technologies and artificial intelligence which is helping us to detail all our spaces. So the lessons learned in healthcare architecture are now being applied in all other types of buildings. Traditionally, whatever science would learn, it would apply to space applications first, then defense application, then into the medical sciences and medical field. Now it is going the other way around. Whatever are the learnings of medical architecture, they are being applied into the normal outdoor, indoor environments which people are using. So from the medical sciences, we are learning how we have to take care of the infection and how we have to control infection on various surfaces and materials. So in the next slide, what we are showing is this touchless machine enabled apps which are helping people and they're answering. So we used to have touch screens. So now we have apps on the phone which you can do it. So your phone, you have to disinfect it and you have to use it. And people are not sharing phones. Once upon a time, we would give a phone to the next person and say, you talk to him, you listen to him. Now they say, no, you talk on your own phone. I'll talk on my phone. Maybe we can talk on phone. So meetings between people in rooms next to each other are also happening on these platforms. So the dashboards and all those things are the new normals which are happening. So there is a lot of learning which has happened and it has happened very fast because there is too much of uncertainty. When is the vaccine going to be developed? Until how long we're going to live with this COVID is not known. Not every country can be New Zealand, which is free of COVID, because it will also have to open at airports and all to the public, to people from all over the world, and it may still get the infection. So the world is a global village. We are all interconnected, and the problem is of the rich and the poor and all the different races, different peoples everywhere. So we have to see international health. What is the role of WHO? What is the regional cooperation? What we have to do at the national levels? And health is a state subject. It is on a concurrent list, and it's a central subject at the same time. So everybody is to join together in interdisciplinary, multi-sectorial teams, and we have to say in this time of emergency what we can do, how we can contribute to the society. And the hospitals and all cannot ask now that my staff is not coming, they are not helping, people are not working, how can I reserve the beds, how can I keep beds empty? We have to ensure that all the beds are occupied with people who deserve to be on the bed, and as many people as possible may be treated at home. So these were the concepts which we would learn. Telemedicine was there for 20 years, nobody was using it. Now it is in vogue. Home care is in vogue. ICU at home. Innovations in the use of ventilators. 2 people, 3 people, 5 people using the same ventilator. Intubation, how to control infection. How many intensive care nurses we have, how many doctors we have, and how many staff members we have, and how do we take care of our frontline workers and their morale high, because these people cannot go home. So for 1 bed in a hospital for critical patients, we have to have beds for the caregivers, maybe in hotels or somewhere, so that they take care of themselves. They treat the patients for 14 days and they get an off for 14 days. So there is a big shortage of caregivers and beds, which is happening. So we have to take care of all these things. So in the next slide, I'm going to give you what is the changes which are happening in the designing. So in the operation theaters, people were cutting corners. They were not doing the disposal corridor for disposal of things. So we have 4 zones in the OT complex, and we have to ensure and take care that we do provide all these 4 zones. The protective zone, the clean zone, the sterile zone, and most importantly, the disposal zone. How do we dispose our personal protective gear? How do we dispose the biomedical waste? How do we have the air pressures in the different zones of a hospital are very, very important. So we have to take care of specialized agencies, specialized professionals doing their specialized work. So we have to have a hospital consultant, we have to have a end user, we have to have the facility managers when we are designing. So it's a team approach, and that team is to be there at any given time. So the evidence is to be used and taken care of. So this is the designing of operation theaters, which is used. The same methodology is used in the designing of labs for testing, the manufacturing units where vaccines are to be produced, cold chains wherein they have to be transported, and at the primary centers, in the clean delivery rooms, at the last mile where these vaccines have to be administered to the patients. So the cold chain and the cleanliness and the hygiene standards have to be maintained all over. So there are WHO guidelines, national guidelines, training manuals available on the net, wherein we have to produce nurses, ANMs, the dental doctors and the Ayush doctors to be pitching in when we will say that we are going to run short of the healthcare service providers. So in the next slide, we are going to tell you what are the changes which are happening in the construction technologies. So we are doing steel structures which are coming up faster, and we are integrating the services and the structural systems in a way that the construction comes up faster and the floor to floor height required also is reducing. So the newer BIM softwares, the prefabricated building modules, the services and structures integration, the additional electrical points, because what is now being required is people want a lot of oxygen points and a lot of power points to plug on all the additional equipment which are required for the ICU kind of a setting. So people who can be taken care of at home. So there are a lot of home care packages which a lot of these private hospitals are coming up with. And we have to take care of the UV disinfection. One word of caution here, all blue light is not UV light, and UV light is to be turned upwards. It is to be used when there are lesser number of patients in the room. So when there is people in the room, the UV light is not to be thrown on the skin of the people because it may cause certain side effects. So in the next one, I'm going to tell you that in the construction, in the building management system, in the facilities management system, there are lots of changes which are coming up. So we have access controls which are very, very important, because in a COVID hospital, if we have a non-COVID patient coming in, that patient may get infection. What Florence Nightingale had said then is very valid even today, which means the hospital should not do any harm to the patient. What we say is that a person comes to hospital with one disease and goes back with 3 more diseases. So we have smart energy meters, we have temperature sensors, we have CO2 sensors. So we have lot of these digital motion sensors and all these things which are being added. The problem with all these systems is they are high maintenance, high cost, high resources, and we are a resource constrained setting here. What is urgently required in India is to convert a lot of other uses into temporary facilities wherein we could do quarantines at the airports, at the railway stations, at districts, in colleges, in educational institutions, in schools, community centers, and even in housing societies where there are flats which are vacant. They could be used for home isolation, isolation of people, and quarantining of people. So a lot of these centers have to come up almost overnight to take care of the massive surge in the patient load which we are getting in COVID times now. So I've talked about digital signages of the parking lots which are managed, and you can know where is the parking available, what are the smart HVAC systems, the lighting systems which have sensors which will work, and the fire control. So prevention, detection and firefighting systems. What I want to say is that these systems may also be used for disinfection of spaces. So we could spray the disinfectant with the firefighting system. So it will help that the system is being checked and used and it is in working order, and the disinfection can also happen. So there are silver linings everywhere, and we have to learn all these systems. So then the existing facilities, each of the facilities has to have a pre-entrance or an airlock or a space like that, and social distancing spaces. So even in the malls, in the shopping centers, in the hospitals, we are keeping one seat away from the other. If you maintain social distancing, then with your mask and all, hopefully you are not infecting other people. So what we are revamping the existing healthcare spaces with is we are sanitizing the entry points, we are integrating the screening areas. So these all have to be touchless systems, and we have to decongest the waiting areas as per social distancing norms, and the toilets have to be taken care of very, very properly, that not too many people. So these are the places the infection can happen. So there are these new signages which have come up, which have these COVID factors. So these signages are minimum contact. They're adding HEPA filters. Filtration is good, but we have to kill these pathogens also. So if we keep the HEPA filter and it keeps all the pathogens, all the viruses there, then they are very, very dangerous. So we have to enhance the AHU capacities, and we have to put the UV disinfection in the AHUs, because the AHU, the air is there and the human beings are not there. So in the AHUs, we may use as many UV lights as possible, and we could dehumidify, humidify according to the conditions, and we install delay tanks in the sewage system. So people are monitoring the sewage these days and they can tell where is the infection. So that these are the public health measures which are now taking place. If we go to the history of the human settlements, it is the pandemics and the epidemics which brought about the changes in the planning of human settlements. So we would now like to be more dispersed. Ideally, we should now aim for slumless human settlements, because it is in the very congested settlements that we are finding that this COVID is not manageable. So then in the facilities management, we have to take care of reducing the risk of spreading the infection. We have to eliminate the window curtains. So the curtains and the surfaces and the areas which have dust can settling are to be said no. And we have to have e-glass and smart glass. All these things are very good for high income Western kind of JCI standards. So the problem with India is we have this international standard hospitals which take care of the patients who are coming from other countries or the very rich sections of a society, which are these private corporate hospitals. And we have the government setups where 90% of the budget goes into paying the salary of the staff, and very little money is left to do this touch-free control for lighting, temperatures, and other building controls. So the strategic plans for disaster relief situations all over the world, they have come up with various innovative solutions. So what happened in Israel, or what happens in Chicago, and ambulance bay being utilized in 32 bed wing, which is converted into a negative pressure area. I would like Sandal to tell about all these things, and I would stop here and I would request Sandal to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir. So now, as we are going to discuss about facilities management of healthcare spaces. So as sir was already talked about, we need to look upon reducing the risk of spreading infection. So there are examples from all over the world. Here I would like to mention about the Rambam Hospital in Hafia, Israel, which has converted the parking lot into a healthcare facility during wartime. So these are kind of innovative solution which we can look upon. Then there are certain other example. HKS Architects have proposed a conversion of a hotel building into a hospital. So this illustration in the screen can show you how they have managed to change a guest room of a hotel into a patient room of hospital. So they have covered the carpet with protection tape, then they have added a power strip for a bedhead panel, and they have removed the unwanted furniture. They have created anti-room for healthcare workers, and then they have also told us about the stacking of the hotel building, like how it should be converted for the hospital. And with that, they have managed to give an idea of the site planning as well. So this is one example, and we can look into other examples also. So this Cura connected units for respiratory ailments. They have aimed to convert shipping containers into plug-in intensive care pods for COVID-19 pandemic. So right now this facility is under construction in Milan. So this is also another innovative example which we can see. And then there is another example from Western Williamson Partners. They have proposed floating hospitals with shipping containers stacked on the ship, and one container is one bed per ICU. So in these illustrations, they've explained the idea of how they are converting the entire hospital, entire shipping container ship into a hospital. So, so these are few innovative examples in the world around which are happening right now in this pandemic situations. And I guess a lot of things have already been covered in the presentation regarding planning, designing, construction and facilities management. And we guess we are open to question and answers from the audience now.
The question is there from Sushant Ranjan, student. And the question is, changes shall be made in designing healthcare spaces, such as design of OPD areas, their waiting halls, distances between beds and their arrangements in IPD zones, provision of anti-rooms for preventing from contamination. This question is for architect Sandal Kapoor.
Yes, ma'am. So to answer that question, I would like to mention that we have already spoke about OT flow approach. Though as we have different zones in our OT department, similarly now with this pandemic around, we need to look into each and every department design, and we have to go for the OT approach flow. So in OPD also we need to segregate different zones like screening, then protective zone, then clean zone, then sterile, and then disposal. So all these zones have to be segregated in each and every department now. So that is with the design approach methodology for any department.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to next question is by Rachna Vani, student again. What about management? The question is to Dr. Anil Diwan. Sir, unmute yourself.
So, see, management, like we said, in this case, we are not living in different silos anymore. So the people who are operations people and the people who run the hospital and the persons who give the clinical care to the patients and the planners and designers have to come together, and they have to come up with the standard operating procedures or the management system or the working system. Like I said, maybe the OPD is shifted physically outside the campus. Maybe we have 20% of the beds as COVID beds, so a different wing which is a COVID wing. Maybe a certain facility becomes 100% COVID beds only, like we say in the Jhajjar National Cancer Institute is now 100% COVID only facility. So it is an infectious diseases facility for COVID only. So we have management at the national level, at the regional level, at the state level, and at a facilities level. So we could administer the functions properly. We could get guidelines from the WHO. We could get the National Disaster Management Authority telling us that this is a pandemic, that this is a medical emergency, and we have to take care of the law and order situation also. For how long can we keep people locked in? They have to go and do some economic activities also. So all these things come under the management, and it's a very vast subject, and it will take time, and over time there will be learnings, and those learnings will be applied. So the best practices are to be applied from all over the place. That is all I have to say on this.
Okay, sir. We'll go to next question. Is by Arsh Malhotra, student. What factors to be considered while designing HVAC system of COVID-19 healthcare center? And this question is for architect Raja Singh.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. So first we have to figure out whether we are designing a makeshift facility or we are designing a proper hospital which has no budget constraints as such, which has all the money that you require to put in a proper HVAC system. Because if we choose a HVAC system, we have to choose the whole hospital as a system which is set of negative and positive pressures. We have to make sure that there is a pressure difference between the toilet and the ward, and there's a further pressure difference between the ward and the corridor. This is done through mechanized devices like fans and other systems which are duct based, so that there is a pressure difference created, so that from the ward there is no spread of infection to the corridor, and from the toilet there is no gas coming to the ward. So this system has to be designed as a whole. The hospital has to be designed as a whole system. If we choose to make a makeshift hospital, there we have to, if we are choosing a naturally ventilated hospital, then we have to depend on proper window design, penetration design. Windows have to have proper control. They have to have proper meshing, so that we prevent any kind of insects from coming in, but we at the same time allow the natural air to come in, which is supported with a lot of passive design inbuilt into the building. Now, what else has to be given in the HVAC system for the first case of a proper hospital is that we need to, right now there's a lot of conversation about, lot of research and lot of practice about use of UV light. So this UV light systems have to be put up right in the air handling unit, so that when it is passed from the room to the AHU, the virus or any other pathogen is killed right in the AHU. Apart from that, we have to give stand-alone as much as possible. We have to give stand-alone segregated AHUs for each isolation ward, so that there is no mixture of the air from one ward to the other ward. Segregation of services is the key. Your traditional HVAC design will not work. You will have to have segregated service with respect to HVAC to be provided in such hospitals that you are going to make.
Next
I hope that
question.
answers the question.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Next question is by Varun Garg. In what way the planning has to change in high density population where people are illiterate during COVID-19? And this question is for Dr. Anil Dewan.
This is a very good question, and this is the typical Indian situation. So when the COVID pandemic was coming into India, eminent people like JRD Tata said that let us do our urban planning now in a way that we have no more slums. So it's very difficult to be in situations where a lesser number of slums. So what happens if we get a COVID positive case in a slum situation? That person is to be sent into an isolation center or a quarantine center, and the rest of the family members also maybe have to be shifted into institutional school building or a stadium or something, which are the makeshift systems for these people. But again, we say, suppose we have a stadium, it's a large area where a lot of beds are spread and the airborne infection is going from one person to another. So these are typical Indian problems, and we will have to find local solutions to our local problems. So we may think global, we may get advice from the global agencies, but we'll have to come up with a local solutions to these problems. Okay. We'll have to learn and come up with answers. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Next question is from Asta Sina. How to make the society more resilient and sustainable in the context of pandemic diseases? This is for Raja Singh.
Thank you so much for this question. Before answering this question, I want to talk about an important thing that whether COVID is an airborne disease or not, there is still research going on. It is believed
I think there is some problem on this side. Can we go to next question? Yeah, Akshay, we can go to next question. Next question is this is from. Are you back, Architect Raja Singh?
Raja Singh, can you hear us?
No, I think next question we'll take. That is from Santhi Level K, professional practitioner. Retrofitting of existing healthcare facilities need to be executed based on fresh pandemic requirements. Will FSI rules be adopted for this purpose? This question is for Architect Sandal Kapoor.
So thank you for this question. As Professor Diwan have already explained things about floor area ratio in this pandemic time, how the amendment in bylaws should happen and incentives should be given for buildings which are compliant the social distancing norms and other emerging guidelines. So I guess when we are retrofitting the existing setups, these things as per the social distancing norm, and we are decongesting the existing waiting areas, these all should also be goes into the incentive nature of building bylaws. But that's a call of amendment building bylaws and policy dependent. But personally, I should feel yes, that there should be amendment in floor area ratios regarding retrofitting.
Sorry, there was some issue. I'm back.
Okay.
Can I continue answering my question?
Yes, yes, you can.
Yes, sorry for the interruption. So I want to make this clear that COVID is right now through droplet and contact, but there are so many other diseases which are through the airborne route. There is research which has strong evidence that COVID is through airborne, and in closed spaces, in wards, it is going through airborne, as good as airborne route also within very short distances. So, but it is always a good idea to follow all the airborne infection control measures in all spaces. So to answer that question, we have to be very clear about one thing. That thing is prevention is better than cure. This is the gospel truth for any good progressive society to prevent diseases. So what we need to be doing, if you look at London, if you read some Charles Dickens novels, you will see that during the Industrial Revolution and after that, London was a very congested slum-like space with pollution, dirty rivers and everything. Today, these European cities are clean. Their rivers are clean. Their roads are clean. We say that these are clean countries because after so many epidemics that have happened there, people have begun to take a lot of care in making sure that their city is clean, that their city is sanitized, city is hygienic. So India has to now follow that path where we believe in prevention is better than cure, right from our housing design to our city design and to our city planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from C.S. Gupta, professional practitioner, and this is for Dr. Anil Diwan. How do we achieve 3 beds per 1,000 population as per WHO standards?
Okay, so India is a low income economy. We are a low resource country, but there are some parts in India where there are a lot of beds. So in Indian health system, we say there are tribal areas, there are rural areas, and there are urban areas. Most of the doctors and facilities are in the larger cities, like we can say Delhi, and we can say Mumbai, and we can say bigger Bangalore and all these places. So we have a lot of beds, but the beds are concentrated in the large urban settings. What COVID has done is it is a greatest equalizer ever. So the problem is much more in the urban settings. The rural areas may isolate themselves and may have very few patients, and thus their lesser number of beds could also take care of. So now the days of bed population ratio are over. What we have to take care of is how much is the throughput of the bed, how many patients have been treated on that bed over a period of time, how we could do home care, ICU at home at a lower level of facility. We could give oxygen to people. Does the person need intubation and ICU care? Only those people should come to these 3 beds per 1,000 population. Rest of the care has to be given in home, community and institutional settings which are of lower level of care. So there has to be a paradigm shift, and that is what is the topic of our webinar. This is all I have to say.
Okay, sir. Next question is from Ranjana Mittal, academician. Can we afford the extra space required? And this question is for Dr. Anil Diwan. Can we afford the extra space required?
We cannot afford, because we've been saying all through that we are a resource constrained country. But within this country also we have JCI accredited corporate hospitals. We have the AIIMS and AIIMS like hospitals. We have the super speciality, multi-speciality centers. We have trust hospitals, we have missionary hospitals, and we have the rural hospitals. So there are various standards. The defense services have standards for accommodation which have disaster expansion in them. So they have wide corridors and large spaces with good height and natural ventilation. So those kind of spaces which are using traditional wisdom are now very good. We agree with ma'am that we are resource constrained and we don't have the money to provide for the space standards of social distances which may be required now onwards.
Thank you, sir. There are 40 questions, but I think most of the questions are answered through the presentation of experts. So we'll not take these questions. And now I would like to sum up the session in brief. Like in the beginning, architect Raja Singh has elaborated on how we can shift from design-based approach to performance-based approach. And he elaborated on indoor air quality, then how natural ventilation can help in reducing the infections in indoor spaces. Then what is the role of architect for thermal comfort and fresh air supply. Then he has also shown us the different types of ventilation, then how to use as per requirement, then how natural ventilation can be achieved through passive techniques like orientation, sunshade design, then appropriate material and vegetation, then nasofilters pollution net for reducing the pollution and allowing fresh air to come in. Then he has also briefed about light and ventilation as a fundamental right to control infections in hospitals. Then Professor Anil Diwan has elaborated on existing healthcare system and the tier of healthcare system in India. Then after COVID-19, how can be there changes as a home care, then ICU facilities at home, technology, telemedicine, then how can we amend the building bylaws, then incentive for spaces design as per the social distancing norms and other emerging guidelines. Then he has also elaborated on how all stakeholders like architects, engineers, users and policymakers and administrators can come together to solve these problems. And planning of healthcare spaces, he has shown us various building typologies. Then he has also elaborated on changes in spaces, how more area is about the building could be used, like triage and screening facilities as management tool, then modular approach, then converting non-treatment areas into airflow pattern, then how we can use the signages and graphics. Then he has also briefed about protective environment, how it can be handled at different level, like center, state, district, and local level. Then very important aspect is that design of operation theaters, then disposal of biomedical waste, then segregation of zones, and protective, clean, sterile, and disposal. Then he has also briefed about WHO and national guidelines. Then what will be the changes in construction technologies such as prefab building, then modulars, then parallel service integration, additional electrical equipments, then exploring materials with inherent properties like copper, silver, and use of UV disinfection. Then how can we integrate technology as building management systems to solve our problems? Then revamping of existing healthcare spaces. Then he has also briefed about facilities management of healthcare spaces. And architect Sandal Kapoor has also explained about how can we reduce the risk of infection through innovative solutions. And he has given us the examples around the world, like how converting parking areas, then shipping containers, and then floating hospitals. So I think this was a very, very good and informative session. And I'm sure that all the participants have benefited from that. And I would like to thank all the experts for accepting our invitation and presenting wonderful presentations. Thank you so much. And we will end here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank even all the participants for being there to listen to us patiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.